So we're just 2 days from the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, and for me this signals kind of the changing of the guard, if you will. We're starting to move into the Switch 2 landscape, which is going to probably start to happen very, very quickly after April the 2nd. I think things are going to move extremely fast as far as Nintendo beginning that transition period to move to the Nintendo Switch 2. We're going to see a lot of announcements, a lot of reveals, and just a lot of information being presented for the Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo is obviously very much aware that they want to drive as many customers and many users of the Switch to the Switch 2, and I think they're going to do a really good job at doing that. But that's not really the focus of today's episode. We are going to cover all things Nintendo Switch 2 on the channel, so please, keep tuning in. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about when it comes to the Switch 2. But for today's episode, I want to just take a moment and just kind of talk about the Switch, because it really has been the system that has kind of changed my life in many ways. The Nintendo Switch, when it released in 2017, was a very interesting piece of hardware. I think a lot of people weren't entirely sure if it was something that would actually be successful for Nintendo. There was quite a lot of skepticism around the Nintendo Switch back in 2017. People didn't really know if the hybrid kind of approach would be a successful Nintendo. Obviously, in hindsight, we know now, or we've known for a long time, that it absolutely was the case. And I think it has to do with a very strong backing of games for the system. Just a constant flood of games that kept coming from first parties and of course third parties. We also got to see, some big third parties step up to the plate with early games such as Skyrim, and of course, games like The Witcher 3. We've seen the impossible ports like Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Wolfenstein 2 on the Switch. There's just a massive amount of games and variety on the Switch, and I think that's what made it really so compelling. And the price as well, at $299, and of course the Nintendo Switch Lite at $199, really just kind of made the barrier of entry just so much better. Now, when the Nintendo Switch released, it was not long before it was modified or hacked, if you will. And this was something obviously that is very well documented when it comes to the original hack with the paperclip, basically getting the system into what is known as RCM mode, which allows then for custom payloads to be injected, and of course the atmosphere firmware and all that stuff that went on in the scene. It's obviously well documented. I want to talk about my kind of history with the Switch and how it really kind of changed my life in many ways. So before the Nintendo Switch came out, as mentioned, I was kind of dabbling in various homebrew scenes and just kind of sitting on the sidelines. As someone that is, a lot older these days than I used to be, obviously during the days of the OG Xbox and the 360, I didn't really have as much time to kind of mess around with homebrew and things like that. But I was always still very much interested in, building code on the Switch. So when the Switch was modified or hacked and the homebrew SDK libnx was released, I thought this is a very, very interesting thing for me to take a look at. But at the time, I was more than happy just to kind of focus on, hobby projects on the side. I kind of had a full-time job working in the business industry in software development, of course. And I was just kind of happy just sitting on the sidelines to see, what interesting and cool Switch announcements were made while I was just kind of dabbling on various homebrew ports and emulators and things like that. So around 2019 was when everything started for me. I started my job at Limited Run. I also contracted at Night Dive Studios, and all of a sudden, rather than working, on a hack Switch with a homebrew SDK, I'm working on a Switch dev kit with the official SDK. And I gotta say, that particular transition was very, very seamless. I think a lot of people would probably just assume that a homebrew SDK is inferior in many ways to an official one, but that wasn't actually the case at all. In fact, I found the transition from homebrew libnx to working as an official Switch developer very very natural for me, very organic. So what I really want to illustrate here is just how great Nintendo has been to work with, not only as a partner, but just with their official tools and whatnot. Of course, NDA kind of restricts me from going deeper and discussing, the various specific aspects of that. Nintendo really did a great job with getting more developers on board on the Switch. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one is they were much more accepting and inviting to, solo developers, indie studios, and just kind of the bedroom coder, if you will. And they also made the barrier of entry a lot lower than, let's say, the days of the Wii and the Wii U, where really it was a lot more difficult to kind of, publish your games on the Wii U at the time. But on the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo would offer, dev kits, development hardware, very, very cheap. It was only, I believe it was only, maybe $500 or $600 for a Switch dev kit, an eDev or an ADev at the time. And for me, that really meant that Nintendo was focused on getting as many publishers, as many partners on their platform as possible. And this was a really great thing that they did, because before that, it was very difficult to, get your games on Nintendo platforms unless you were already in the industry or you were already someone that was kind of established, in game development, and you kind of knew the right people. But Nintendo really simplified that whole process. And, for me and for many others, it's been fantastic to, work with Nintendo. And there's probably some people that will be in the comments, that are solo developers or work in smaller teams that have worked on Switch games. Now, as for me, my official game development kind of career, my first shipped game was on a Nintendo Switch platform. Some of the biggest highlights for me working on the Switch, I've done quite a few games on the platform now, but working with Night Dive on Quake, the remaster of the first game, was so much fun to work on. As well as this, working with our partners WayForward on games such as River City Girls Zero and Clock Tower Rewind, amazing, as well as Konami on games such as Rocket Knight Adventures and Ninja 5.0 in recent times. Of course, Tomba was one of my highlights of working on the Switch hardware. But yeah, it's just been so amazing to work with Nintendo hardware, with the Switch hardware for such a long time. I'm kind of very, very blessed and very privileged to, to be in that situation where I can finally work in a commercial sense. Not only this, it also meant that when I jumped on board the Nintendo Switch, I already had a leg up on the hardware. I kind of knew some of the facets of the hardware, how it worked and how the rendering pipelines worked, and how code kind of runs and how it performs and how to optimize. So it really kind of meant that when I did move to the Switch, it was a very, very organic process. Now, since then, obviously, since like 2019, which was my first official Switch game that had shipped, I was very proud. That was a massive moment for me. Not only was it something that Nintendo themselves had posted on their Twitter, official Twitter page, it was an incredible moment for me, seeing, me working on a particular game that is highlighted on a Nintendo Switch brand account. An incredible feeling, and it's not something that I take for granted. I think a lot of people in the industry would love to have something like that happen to their games that they're working on, whether that is, their solo indie developers or just, something like that, right? But like for me, it was an amazing feeling seeing your games, being promoted by Nintendo on their brand account. This is the same guy, I'm the same guy that was working on a hack Switch probably, only a couple of years before that, in like 2017 or 2018. And I think the Switch 2 is going to be a very similar thing. We're going to see really cool announcements on the hardware, not only from obviously a first party, but a lot of third parties will be showing up to the table with their announcements. And I'm really interested to see what type of smaller indie projects make their way onto the new platform. And look, I'm very proud. I'm very proud to have left my mark on the Switch. I've worked on different titles over the years. I'm still working on Switch titles. We're certainly not done yet, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge just the wonderful, wonderful hardware that I've been working on, all the way back since 2017. It's been an amazing journey. So thank you to Nintendo. I'm very excited about the Switch 2. There's going to be some really cool announcements about it. We're going to be covering all aspects of the Switch 2 when the system starts to finally show up. We're going to be doing teardowns. We're going to be looking at backward compatibility. We're going to be looking at benchmarks. We're going to be doing all sorts of different tests with the hardware to see how well it performs. Is it really going to be a significant jump from the first Switch? I think it will be, but it will definitely remain to be seen how long it's going to take for developers to untap that potential. There's going to be some, definitely some ramp up time where developers need to get familiar with the hardware, but I'm here for it. I'm excited. And I'll be definitely covering aspects of the Switch 2 as we get into April the 2nd and beyond. But for now, guys, we're going to leave it here for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. This was a off-the-cuff video, but I did want to take the opportunity just to acknowledge the fantastic hardware Nintendo has given us since 2017, and hopefully we'll see some really cool things go forward with the Switch 2. Take care, guys, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.